William Voss, thank you for agreeing to do your CEO update on camera. Bit different to our normal format.
It's my pleasure.
We are filming here in London. I know it looks like we're hurtling along on the Grand Hibernian, but we are in London, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to update our global teams on what's been happening. The last time the teams will have heard from you was when Dan spoke to you for our exchange pod, and that was in April, so a couple of months ago.
Long time ago, yeah.
It is, but it isn't at the same time.
Yeah.
You only just closed the deal with LVMH. Yeah. Can you give us a bit of a sense of what's been happening, I suppose, since then? How's the conversation continued?
Sure. If we see what has happened since, lots of things have happened, and most of those were perhaps behind the scenes, and therefore it has not been opportune to communicate those to a larger audience. But what I can tell you is that last time we spoke about the fact that LVMH thinks about their maisons or their houses or brands or whatever you want to call them, but as autonomous companies that are run independently, whereas the companies run themselves, they're not, on the other hand, completely independent, and therefore there's certain parts of integration that need to happen to take care that you report on the proper channels and that all of that works. In that specific part, I know that a lot of work has been going on, specifically in the finance group. I know that lots of teams have been getting together to go to the nitty-gritty, what needs to happen in order to achieve what LVMH is looking for, which is highly sensitive reporting lines that are very fast. And the way they think about reporting is very often to say, nearly 1 or 2 days after month closing, the numbers need to be in. That's not quite what we used to have before. So good news, but it also means that a lot of things need to be lined up. And I mentioned finance. Same will go for the procedures in HR, for example, in legal. There's a lot of work going on in many departments, and all that is good. That is all what I would call in the not independent bucket of what we mentioned there. Something that I think is potentially even more exciting, and I need to be careful what I say here, but is the autonomous part. There are a lot of relations that have been starting to build, where you start seeing that between us and some of the other maisons, we start to see what the upside would be of working together. And there's obvious things like in operations, how many bottles of champagne would you sell? How would you do that? How can you promote that? What are the things that you can do together? Think about branding, where in the branding space, how do you buy your advertising? How could we do that better and probably cheaper, but also more efficient by teaming up with some of their maisons and their brands? And like that, there is many other areas where the contacts have been in a probably more informal way set up. Another one I think about is about Dan meeting with some of the LV or Louis Vuitton group in order to see, together with Andrea and the sales team, how we can get their events over to our properties and how can we treat their top VIPs the way they would expect them to be treated. So all of those are, in my opinion, super interesting and incredible, exciting opportunities where we have probably no clue yet of how far that can go. But all in all, if I think about the integration, how are the conversations going, I think it's just this year will be teaching us a lot of what the opportunities are, and then next year is about harvesting some of the things that we'll put together this year.
But you were just back from meeting Bernard Arnault in Paris.
Yeah.
So could you give us a bit of a sense of what is he like in person, and how does he think about Belmond?
Well, I think it's hard to describe a person like Bernard Arnault in just a few sentences, but first impressions are extremely polished. Very smart person. Wouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, I would guess. But what surprised me in a way is that he is so focused on what he is doing. So if you have a meeting with him, he will truly be looking at what is it that is in stake here, what are we talking about, do I really understand what this is all about? And I think that's where his sharpness comes out as well. What from my point was really rewarding is that we had a meeting that normally was expected to last a half an hour, 45 minutes. We took the full of 2 hours to talk about our potential strategy going forward and how things would have changed. And I saw his engagement and his enthusiasm for this type of relatively new business for him, where we're moving into this experiential luxury travel piece, and you could just feel the excitement in the room, and yeah, it was truly rewarding to have this time to spend with the big man in this case. Yeah.
You mentioned there sort of strategy, an initial discussion on I suppose directionally where we might head. LVMH are known that they like to be number one, they like to think long term. Can you share like a little bit about the conversation that you had and the thinking so far?
Yeah, sure. And you know, it's early days to share full strategies because I think that would be premature to go out with that. But the things that have changed and the things that we have been talking about is, let's perhaps first start with the things that haven't changed. You know, we'll continue to focus on being excellent in what we're doing in operating hotels, trains and cruises around the world and giving our customers the kind of experiences that they're looking for. That's our business, that's who we are, that's what we do. And to your earlier point of being number one, absolutely we should be number one in whatever part of the world we're trading in. So that's one. The second piece that hasn't changed is that the brand will be a clear focus point, and the brand will help us to get to both the operational piece and the distribution piece, but also to get us into the third pillar of what we always have been talking about, which is the growth piece, the development piece, where the target is clearly to continue to grow, and the target is clearly to make sure that we have the opportunities for our customers to not only come back to the existing properties, but also to go to new exciting destinations that we will have to offer for them over the years to come. So those are the pieces that haven't changed. What did change is, in the past, or I say in the past, it was only last year, it sounds like ages ago, but being traded on the stock market, there is a continuous pressure on quarterly results and on annual results. And that doesn't always allow you to come to the right business decisions. And in hindsight, there were certain parameters that kept us from doing what I would call the right thing, if you allow yourself to think a little bit longer term. And there you can imagine that, take for example, that we had tremendous pressure on our EBITDA performance quarter by quarter. So if the right thing were to take a property out of a hotel, out of service for a year, we would not do that because we couldn't lose that EBITDA for the year. So what we would do is we would take a little bit of project here, and then next year we would do another piece of that project, and the year thereafter. And that's not the most ideal way of doing it. And that's not the way in the long term how you create maximum value. And I think that these are the kind of things that will change in our future thinking about where are we going to take this company. And over time, I will be clearly able to share more of that with you. If you talk to somebody like Bernard Arnault, or for that sake, his whole entire senior team, they completely get that. And for them, coming back to what we started off with, being number one in the space that you're trading in, that's the end target. And the things in between are obviously important. It's not that because it's such a large company that the financials aren't important anymore. The contrary, it will be important, but the financials are the result of a good strategy, not the other way around.
I like that, and it's great to think, you know, if we are free to sort of spread our ambition, like where that might take us in the long term. I think, you know, the huge potential, obviously. And you did mention there, though, the sort of annual EBITDA targets. I kind of want to just narrow that from the long term back to the more immediate. So 2019, we do have a big target
for sure
for the full year in EBITDA, and you know, I'm assuming that's remains the same and hasn't changed. 180 million is the target. How are we doing?
I thought it was actually 182. So
rounding down.
No, this is the freedom of the interviewer. No, but it's it's a big number. If you look at the numbers, we're say midway through the year, the numbers stack up. Obviously, there each and every one of our properties has their own challenges. Some are doing extremely well, others are more challenged in reaching their targets. Year over year, we have incredible results to show for, and if I look at the full year predictions right now at this point in time, we're somewhere like 14% on EBITDA level better than we were last year, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
The challenge, though, like there's always a challenge. The challenge is that we set ourselves targets that are even higher. So if I now look at some of the numbers that we put in place, I think we had something like a year-over-year growth of 18%. So that means there's still 4% to go.
Yeah.
Now, the third quarter is the quarter that brings whether we're going to make it or break it. And I don't think that it would come as a surprise that I would be counting on everybody to make sure that we do what we got to do to deliver the third and the fourth quarter, and hopefully be able to actually get to the budgeted numbers that we have lined up. But there is still some way to go, or I would say some way to go. There's still work to be done. I know that everybody is fully aware of what their role in that process is. So I'm looking forward to see what it brings. But so far, fantastic results, great year.
And I think just sort of looking at how the next few months of the year are shaping up. So obviously a big peak season in Europe coming up, lots of work there to take place. And then looking a little further down the line, what do the next few months bring? I know you mentioned you've had a few meetings with LVMH. There's a lot of thinking going on behind the scenes. When do you next check in with them?
Yeah, I for now the target would be that we get together somewhere in the beginning of October. That is where we would have our strategic plan laid out in much more detail. I think the broad lines are being defined as we have been speaking about those. But what we need to do now is to translate that in, first of all, say a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year plan, or perhaps even longer. And then that will be refitted with what the budget numbers would be, which probably would be due somewhere in November, I would say.
Okay.
But we should not confuse too much between the budget numbers and the strategic planning. Strategic planning is what it's supposed to be. It is putting a long-term plan for the company in place that holds and that also survives whatever the budgets for the individual years will bring.
It's exciting to think about the future of the company, life in 2020 and beyond.
Yes.
What will it mean for our teams? Like, when can they expect, I suppose, after these meetings, on the plans sort of knuckled down, how do we begin to share that with everyone out in the field?
I will make sure that after those October meetings, or whenever they're going to be, that we'll share the information with all of you out there, and that information flows like we've always tried to keep everybody abreast of what's going on. For me, it's truly important that from wherever you are in the world, whatever level you are in the company, that people understand where we're trying to take the company, and therefore I'm more than happy to share all that strategic thinking with the whole group. An exciting piece of news is that we are planning for January next year. By that time we should be in a position to communicate truly what is going to happen over the years to come. We're planning to have a global exchange. We're trying to get the whole team together again, and we'll prepare and we'll get prepared for a wonderful get-together that should be yet again the start of an incredible new future for this company.
Thank you so much. 2019 obviously shaping up very well, just to wrap up, and global exchange taking place in January. Any final comments before you go away for the summer, just that you're particularly excited about? Anything that you want to give a shout out to in terms of the teams?
No, I think that the meetings that we've had and the news that we get in any way that we communicate with LVMH and until now, and looking forward to the expectations that we have for the remainder of the year, I just think that we have a lot of things working on in our favor, and that is something that I look forward to share, but also to look forward to make happen with all of you. And to everybody, keep your focus on what needs to be done. You all know what you got to do and what has to be done in order for us to hit our targets by year end. And I'm just counting on all of that to happen and to fall in place so that we can, at the end of this year, also look back at a very successful 2019. So at this moment, thanks for all of that. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for doing what you're all doing. And let's keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jos.